everybody, to another edition of Pure Picks. We're here to break down UFC Fight Night, Cannonier versus Borralho, coming up this Saturday. Before we do, as always, we need to recap what happened last week. Got a little bit of a late start this week because still reeling from what happened last week. Overall, we had some decent plays, especially for the straight picks, but as you guys can see here, rode too many units on Gamrot and Urseg specifically. Horrible lesson, I would say, that we had to learn is that, at least my takeaway from this is never fade or never glaze a fighter ever again. I think that we were glazing Gamrot all week, blowing bubbles on it. I was calling this guy the GOAT in the group chat. I mean, I don't know what happened. We just glazed him way too hard. I should have just stuck with my original thesis and went with Dricus du Plessis 5-unit banger. That was my original thesis. So I mean, the Gigalog worked out in my video, but towards the end of the week, I just switched to the Gamrot as far as the lock of the weekend. Obviously, we paid the price there. So yeah, big lesson is always try to go into a fight from a more of like a meticulous detail standpoint of trying to look at ways to fade a fighter rather than trying to ride them, right? Because I think that many times when we're losing units, it's more about riding a certain fighter, and we just lose track of how to be analytical and how to be questioning in terms of some of these fights. So big lesson for me right there. And obviously, I mean, that really took down our night. We did have some good wins from Walter Walker, Jesus Aguilar. The night started off really hot. But yeah, last couple of fights did not go our way. And it's really disappointing because, I mean, shout out to our boy UFC Predictions Tracker. We had 10 out of 12 picks won, and guess who sold our last two picks? It's freaking Gamrot and Urseg. So this just goes to show, I mean, you can make the right picks, you can, make the right profit, but if you ride the wrong people, you put plays on the wrong people, it's not going to work out. So yeah, it was a pretty disappointing week for me, at least, having most of the card right and ending up not in profit as far as the bet MMA tips, but we live and we learn. I mean, overall, we're still 11 units, 11% ROI, 30 units up on the year so far since November. Our straight picks are still on fire. Our parlays took a bit of a dip, but we move on and we move forward. So that about does it for the recap. I just want to move forward and get to this next fight card. So, I mean, this fight card, there's a lot of no-name people that I've seen. Like, I literally have not watched their fights, so I'll be very honest with you guys. I'm gonna skip some of those fights because, yeah, I'm just not gonna even think about putting units on fighters that I haven't seen fight yet. Just to be very honest with you guys, I need to see at least them in the UFC, at least like one of the fighters. If they're making like a debut kind of situation, I'm holding off on that. So I will probably skip some fights on this fight card, but there will be some that I would analyze, and let's get to it. So first fight that we have is Cong Wang, or Wang Cong, versus Victoria Leonardo. This one was almost a skippable fight for me. As you guys can see, I mean, the odds right now, Cong Wang is minus 1,200. She opened up at a minus 350. Yeah, just doing a bit of detail for this fight. Pick your OB Wang, obviously, but I got a giga past this fight because Wang is making her UFC debut. She's a big favorite. She's famous actually for beating Valentin Shevchenko in a kickboxing match, so she has some pedigree there. That was back in 2015, and I just feel like this is a major setup for Caio for Wang here. Leonardo just gets KO'd left and right. Yeah, with these odds, I'm not even touching. I think there's like an over 1.5. That's really alarming in women's fights. I mean, it's minus 200 right now, so maybe there's good value there. Who knows? But yeah, I don't know. I'm not gonna even touch it. I think I'm just gonna pass on this fight entirely. We'll see how good Wang is. Maybe she's the real deal, and if she knocks out Victoria Leonardo pretty early, I think that maybe that's something that we'll take into account in the next fight. But I think for this fight, I'm definitely passing on this fight overall. Pick here will be Wang though, via KO, I believe. Next fight up. This is a skippable pass, skippable fight. Passing on this. I'm not even sure who those people are, to be honest. This fight here, next fight is going to be Jacqueline Cavalcanti versus Josiane Nunes. Odds for this fight right now. So Cavalcanti opened up at a pick'em odds. Now she's minus 214. I got to go with Jacqueline Cavalcanti here. I think she's going to be able to get the decision win here by having the more diverse technical striking game. I do not expect much in terms of grappling in this matchup. I think both these women are more like pure strikers in a way. The difference is, I mean, Jose Nunez is like a poor man's or poor woman's Jessica Andrade. I mean, she does have some really legit power in her strikes, but I think that Cavalcanti has some pop in her strikes too, and I think that'll be enough to hold off some of the forward pressure that Nunes will have. I think Nunes is obviously going to try to bully her, come up, and just try to knock her out. But Cavalcanti has a good footwork, some movement as well. I think that she's going to be quicker on the feet and on the hands. So I think this is going to be a like 30-27 kind of fight. Maybe she'll lose a round, but I don't see her getting knocked out. And I think that's the only way that Nunes is going to win in this fight. Also, MMA math never doesn't always work, but Cavalcanti is coming off dominating Farin, Zara Farin. Nunes had a tough time with Farin. I remember that matchup specifically because had some units riding on Nunes in that fight, and she did not look like a favorite at all. I mean, I think she was like a 4-1 favorite or something like that, pretty crazy. And Farin almost beat her. So yeah, I gotta not side with that. I do like the over 2.5. I think it's like minus 260 right now. It did open up at minus 210, so I mean some of the value has been played, but I still think it's solid. This is going to be a mostly striking matchup in a women's MMA match, and yeah, usually those go over. A lot of the women's finishes most of the time come in more of a grappling situation, so I would go the over in that fight actually. Picker will be Cavalcanti via decision. All right, next up we have Slavikovs versus James Llontop. Odds for this fight right now. So Borshchev minus 190 opened up at a minus 211. This one's a little tricky for me. The pick here is going to be Borshchev. I do think that this is going to be a buy low off of his defeat to Chase Hooper. I mean, we all saw him get dropped by Chase Hooper throwing that, overhand hook, whatever that case was. That's not a good sign, getting dropped by Chase Hooper. But ultimately, he was still subbed. So, even though he was dominated in every facet of the game, he didn't get knocked out at least. And I think that Hooper's takedown grappling threat made Borshchev fear that more. And I think it opened it up, Borshchev to that kind of strike. You also saw that with his fight against Nazim Sadikov. Sadikov also has a well-rounded game, some grappling takedowns as well. And I think Borshchev was kind of fearful of that, and that allowed Sadikov to be able to launch some of his own striking. Now Sadikov's a better striker than Hooper, and I actually think he's a better striker than Llontop too. But I don't think that Llontop has that same grappling threat upside to throw off a guy like Borshchev. So I think that even if he initiated the takedown, I don't think that Llontop has submission skills to really kind of force Borshchev to be threatened by the takedowns themselves. Because Borshchev does do a good job of getting back up. He's really good at scrambling, working his way back up his feet. So while he does get taken down a whole bunch, he actually does do a good job of getting back up. I think on the feet, I think Borshchev's much better. So there is maybe a slight concern that there may be a chin issue from Borshchev because he's been like dropped in back-to-back fights basically. But he showed me that he's enough of a dog to not get knocked out at least, and especially in that Sadikov fight, he was dead to rights. He still came back and made it a draw, right? So yeah, I think that give me Borshchev in this matchup minus 211. I actually think I would consider that as a parlay piece. But I think we might get a better price because I feel like the money's going to go on Llontop for throughout the week. So I still like Borshchev here, but I think we're going to get a better price. I'll wait until we get that better price and then probably attack there. So pick here will be Borshchev. I will say via KO. I think he's going to knock this guy out. Yeah, just wasn't impressed by Llontop in his last performance, to be honest. Next fight, we have Reese versus José Medina. Just look at the odds for this one, too. We have Reese at minus 550. Open up at minus 325. Yeah, I'm full send Reese here. This is like just classic UFC matchmaking. I think that they're bringing in Medina, who lost on the Dana White Contender Series, to face Reese, who's coming off a first round highlight KO victory. On the tape, I mean, Medina doesn't look like anything special. I don't really see, I don't think this guy's UFC caliber. He's like decent everywhere, but he actually fought at 205 before this fight, and now he's dropping down to 185. I think that's going to be a big trouble against a guy like Reese. So, I mean, Reese is not like the quickest or most agile fighter. Like he's kind of, his movements are kind of stiff, but I think that with that drop in weight from Medina, I think that Reese is actually going to be the quicker, bigger guy here, and he's going to be definitely more athletic. I see him find the KO or the club and sub because, I mean, I just feel like Medina is not really good anywhere. So, yeah, give me Reese here. Minus 550. I mean, yeah, that's pretty tough to swallow as far as a parlay piece, especially, Reese is somewhat unproven himself. He lost his first fight against Cody Brundage in the UFC, and then he dominated Julian Marquez. So, I wouldn't be opposed to playing him in a parlay, but I would totally understand if you would want to pass because minus 550 doesn't really add that much value. Personally, I would still use him as a parlay juicer because I'm just fading José Medina. I don't think this guy's UFC caliber, and they just brought him in for a reason to probably get finished by Reese here. Let's move on to the next fight. So this one is pretty interesting. We have Dennis Buzukja versus Francis Marshall. It used to be Danny Silva, but I think he dropped out for, I don't even know what reason why he dropped out, but he dropped out of the fight. This is a really interesting one. So it opened up at pick'em odds, and then Francis Marshall is now a minus 145 favorite. I don't really see why that happened, honestly. Kind of really strange line movement. So the pick here will be Buzukja. I'm going with the underdog here. I do think that it could be a close competitive fight, actually. Ultimately, I'm siding with Buzukja because I think he'll be able to negate most of the wrestling and grappling that Marshall has for him. Marshall is more of a wrestler and grappler. I think that Buzukja actually has a pretty good defensive grappling skill set. He does a good job of having good takedown defense. I believe that Buzukja is just going to make this a wild brawl, and with his forward pressure and get into that kind of dirty fight in a way. Buzukja also has a solid offensive takedown game, but I don't think he's shown it in the UFC yet. So that's really interesting. I think he's just chosen to strike more. In this kind of fight, I do view it more as a 50-50 fight, like exactly like how the odds showed up. So I'm surprised that people are taking action on Francis Marshall, making him a slight favorite. I think that Buzukja has enough firepower and wildness to land on a guy like Marshall. Could be very similar to, how he fought Connor Matthews, right? I think Francis Marshall also beat Connor Matthews. So both these guys have beaten the same opponent before. But yeah, I think both of these guys do like to take one to give one and, give me the dog odds on Buzukja in that kind of fight. So for me, I think Buzukja is going to be winning by decision. Let me check real quickly. I don't think they've drop those odds yet. The over 2.5 could look good as well if you don't want to back either fighter, but I do like backing Buzukja dog odds here. Next up, we have Edmen Shahbazyan versus Gerald Meerschaert. I think we're in the main card now. Edmen Shahbazyan opened up at a minus 325. Now he's a minus 280. This might be unpopular because I feel like I'm getting a lot of dog action love on MMA Twitter and social media on GM3 this week. I don't see it the same way, honestly. Give me Shahbazyan in this fight. On the surface, this seems like, another grappler versus striker, right? But I actually think that Shahbazyan has like decent wrestling, offensively at least, and I think he could use that to win minutes against a guy like Meerschaert. Much has been made about Edmen's lack of bottom game and takedown defense. There's so many clips of him just getting taken down and then held down there for the majority of the fight. But look at the guys who he's fighting. We got like Derek Brunson, Jack Hermanson, even Imavov is even a good offensive grappler. I think that Meerschaert is more of like a BJJ grappler than a purist wrestler, and I think he's going to have more of a difficult time taking down Shahbazyan than most people think. Shahbazyan, in his last fight, he looked bigger and he looked toned in his last fight. I feel like he's growing into that kind of man body, that prime, if you will. People forget that Shahbazyan came into the UFC like age 21, and now he's like age 26. So he's definitely looking better at 185. Meerschaert obviously will always have that sub threat. This guy's like either has the most subs in that division or like tied or something like that. So that is a concern, but Shahbazyan has never been subbed yet, and he's been finished more so by like ground and pound people, rather than like, people who like do jiu-jitsu submissions on him. So the only big concern I have also, aside from the sub threat, is that Shahbazyan does have some cardio issues. He does slow down at the later the fight goes. I remember his fight against Fluffy Hernandez. That was like really evident. He started off actually pretty well, but that's a different case. That's Fluffy Hernandez, one of the best cardio grapplers in UFC history at this point, with the pace that guy pushes out. So even with that concern, I still like Shahbazyan because on the feet, this is not going to be close, and every fight starts on the feet. I also think that he has top control upside against a guy like Meerschaert, who would be more than willing, I think, to engage in that like grappling bottom guard game. So I do like Shahbazyan here. I think Shahbazyan via KO. And also one other point I would like to say is AJ Dobson. Obviously everybody saw that he kind of like dropped Edmen Shahbazyan or rocked him. I don't think GM3 has those fast hands like AJ Dobson. I think people forget that AJ Dobson, I feel like I'm not sure 100%, but I think he came up from welterweight to middleweight for that fight. I'm not too sure. Let me okay, never mind. Yeah, but yeah, I think AJ Dobson is actually, has much quicker hands than GM3. I don't think Edmen's going to get caught like that. Edmen does have some pretty bad striking defense, but I don't think a guy like GM3 is going to catch him. So, yeah, I like Shahbazyan via KO. Minus 280. I actually think that's decent value because I think I'm fading GM3 this week. I don't think he's gonna have enough for Edmen all around. Just that sub threat, but I think Edmen will stay safe. So give me Shahbazyan for this week. Let's move on to the next fight. So we have Neil Magny versus Michael Morales. Looking at the odds for this one, Michael Morales is minus 800, opened up at a minus 550. I gotta say that's pretty shocking to me. So the pick here will be Morales. Obviously, I don't think I'm gonna go against him in this matchup, but I think these odds are a little disrespectful for a guy like Neil Magny. Morales, while I think the odds are disrespectful, I do think Morales should have Magny covered everywhere in this fight. Main reason why Magny won his last fight is Mike Malott just gassed. Mike Malott was winning the first 2 rounds, just throwing Magny around, punching him, kicking him, doing whatever he could. And Morales, one thing about him that's for sure is that this guy has proven cardio in the UFC. He's gone to a good amount of decisions. He does a great job just maintaining a consistent pace for the whole 15 minutes. Yeah, I think just because of that, I think he's going to be able to just style on Magny on the feet. I think he's the better striker here. Now, he's also been able to get a finish as well. So, I mean, maybe this is the time that he gets to finish. But he's really well rounded. I mean, Morales is a really good fighter. I just do think the odds are disrespectful though, because I mean, that's crazy. Like plus 550 for Neil Magny, who has so many wins in the UFC, especially via decision. And this, I feel like this is going to go decision for sure. I mean, I don't see a finish here. It opened up at plus 120 and for the over 2.5. Now it's been played to 180. I don't see a finish here. I mean, I think that this fight is probably going to go to decision. So because of that, I mean, Neil Magny makes it a close decision most of the time. And I don't think Michael Morales has this like all-inspiring like stand-up game like Ian Gary with the leg kicks, or I don't think he's going to be able to take down Neil Magny and just like straight up sub him like Gilbert Burns. So I think this is going to be a closer fight than people think, but I still think Morales is going to pull it off because we've seen him do this already. I mean, he beat a kind of a similar veteran to Neil Magny in Max Griffin, just got off of beating Jake Matthews in a just another clean kind of performance, easy win. So I think he's going to win, but I would not play him at minus 800. Yeah, that's just too much for me. I'll give my thoughts on this one, just because I did watch a bit of tape on both of these guys. I will pass on this fight though, but I'm gonna go with Valentin here. On the surface, this is another classic wrestler versus striker matchup. Loder is that D1 wrestler. Valentin is that striker. Let's look at the odds. Actually, I forgot to tell you guys about that. Valentin is minus 161. Opened up at minus 250. Yeah, that's probably a little high. Minus 250 is probably a little high, but yeah, I'm going Valentin here just because he's a better striker. And the Vegas judges, I feel like they like striking a little bit more, and especially the UFC, they like striking a little more. So if this does go to decision, and Valentin's able to get some strikes off, because he's a pretty wild striker, so he might go for the highlight, might catch and do some damage to Loder. And Loder, I mean, this guy's just going to come out and try to be a wet blanket. And, if he does that for like majority of the fight for like most of the 15 minutes, maybe you have to give it to him. But I'm going Valentin here via decision. I would just pass on this fight though, personally, because I mean, once again, both these guys are making technically their debut in the UFC, although this will be the Ultimate Fighter finale. I just wouldn't feel comfortable putting any units on either fighter for this fight. Let's move on to the co-main event. So this one is pretty near and dear to my heart. It's going to be Angela Hill versus Tabatha Ricci. Obviously, Angela Hill, former lock of the week for me in the past when she beat Luana Pinheiro in that matchup. Let's look at the odds for this. So Angela Hill right now, plus 130 opened up, and now she's a minus 112. All right, look, I'm going to go with my girl Angela Hill. That's been my lean since the beginning, but there are a few concerns for her. Ricci, you know how I like to do the simp trap fade, and never I don't like to go with the simps. And obviously Tabatha Ricci has a textbook profile for the simp trap, right? But if you actually watch Ricci fight, I mean, she does fight pretty hard for 15 minutes, and I don't think she's going to be able to. She's not going to fold like a Luana Pinheiro. I think that she actually has that dog in her. Unfortunately for Hill, I do think that Hill has had a couple of favorable matchups over Pinheiro, who's kind of fraud in a way. Denise Gomes just inexperienced. I don't think she was experienced enough to beat Angela Hill. I do think that Hill will be the better striker in this matchup, but Ricci is a better fighter than both those women that Angela Hill beat, skill for skill. I mean, Angela Hill used a lot of grappling and takedowns to beat Denise Gomes. She ended up subbing Luana Pinheiro. I don't see that happening because Ricci's actually a pretty good grappler. And she has some good judo throw. Like she's a good grappler. So I don't think she's a better grappler than Hill. So I think that Hill is pretty straightforward. She's gonna try to just do what she did to Lupi Godinez. Lupi obviously I think struck for more of that than that fight. She didn't really shoot for takedowns, but she's just gonna try to keep it up with her takedown defense for Hill, and she's gonna just try to stay outside and kind of stick and poke, right? And Ricci's obviously gonna come forward, try to initiate the grappling, and just try to be aggressive and try to bully Hill for 15 minutes. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a close fight. It's definitely gonna go decision. I don't see a finish happening here. So that will be my concern, is that Hill's not going to be able to use her grappling and takedowns like she did in her last 2 fights. This could play out similarly to her loss against Mackenzie Dern. I don't think it's going to be that brutal because Hill was getting pieced up by Dern coming off that divorce. But I do think that Ricci in her last fight, she showed that she can make it a close fight fighting this way. Again, Tisha Torres was also a kind of a similar fighter to Hill, where she had decent takedown defense and also she was a better striker, but Ricci was able to pull off that split decision. And who knows what the judges will think about this kind of fight. Could be a close one. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to stay away from this fight. The pick here will be Hill via decision, and I'm rooting for her, but I don't trust her enough in this matchup against Ricci, unfortunately. Let's look at the main event. So this is the fight that I'm actually most excited about for this fight card, aside from the Dennis Buzukja Francis Marshall one. This one is Jared Cannonier versus Caio Borralho. Let's look at the odds for this fight. We got Borralho at minus 240, open up at minus 150. Man, okay, I was trying to make cases for the Cannon Man because I actually like him as a dog a lot. I mean, this guy is very much a dog, but I'm gonna have to go with Caio here, unfortunately for him. Cannonier, this guy almost had he had an early stoppage, right? But he was on his way to losing either a decision or getting finished in that fight against Imavov. I think that Cannonier showed up early, which was kind of surprising because he was coming off an injury and he's 40 years old, but he actually came out, did pretty well in the beginning, but faded really as the fight went on. And in the later rounds, and with this being a 5-round fight, I could see a similar thing happening here. I mean, the big difference here is that I think Caio, he's going to turn this fight into a wrestling match pretty early on, I think. And he's going to sap away a lot of Cannonier's power that he has and just make Cannonier less dangerous as the fight goes on. I do think that Caio is an improving striker. He's obviously he's not the best. That's not his game. His game is more of a grappling-based approach, but I do believe that in his last fight, he showed that he improved in that aspect. He was, piecing up Paul Craig. I mean, obviously Paul Craig's not the same as Jared Cannonier, but at least Caio showed me that he at least has some good straight shots, good 1-2. He has some hands. I just think that Cannonier, I have to fade him in this fight because he's 40 years old, coming off a few injuries, did not look that great in his last fight in the later rounds. I think that also another key thing is Cannonier, he actually had some good control time against Imavov early in the fight, ended up having 6 minutes of control time. I believe that sapped away some of his energy, doing some of those grappling changes, doing the clinch work. And I think that Caio and the Fighting Nerds Gym, I mean, these guys have been undefeated. I don't think we can fade them until they actually lose. But I think Caio saw that as far as the grappling. And I think that he knows that if he initiates some of that grappling, gets into some of those grappling exchanges, he's going to be able to make Cannonier tired, just like how Cannonier tired himself out in that last fight against Imavov. So I think he's just going to wear down Cannonier with the grappling and then make him an easier target in later rounds, potentially start piecing him up. But for sure, Caio's going to come in with a good game plan to win this fight. So I'll give Cannonier respect of saying I think he's going to not get finished by Caio. So give me Caio via decision. I would actually play him as a parlay piece of man. I think he shouldn't be minus 300, honestly, in this matchup. I do think Caio is that good as far as the grappling, and I think he's going to get some takedowns. Cannonier has never had the best takedown defense as well, so that's a huge concern for me in this fight. I'm gonna go Caio via decision, and I would ride Caio as a parlay piece. Anything better than minus 300. That about does it for the breakdown of UFC Fight Night, Cannonier versus Borralho. Best of luck, everybody. I mean, from us, we're gonna try to fine tune our picks, really come out with a profit this week, and yeah, best of luck, everybody, this week.